Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Metanoia podcast. I'm so glad you're joining us, whether you're on our podcast, whether you're watching on YouTube, or whether you're tuning in live on Zoom. We're so grateful that you've made space in your day to join us for conversations at the intersection of social and spiritual renewal. And today, I'm so thrilled to be able to connect with the Reverend Dr. Jacqui Lewis, who has written an incredible new book, Fierce Love, and has also just been an incredible voice along my own spiritual journey over the past 10 years. She's spoken so much wisdom into my life. I've learned so much just from observing how she did ministry, how you do ministry. And so, Reverend Lewis, so good to have you with us. Thank you for being here.
Reverend Brandan. It was so good to be with you, Reverend Robertson. Let's just Jacqui and Brandan, right?
Yeah, totally.
It's good to be with you. Yeah. It's so good. Yeah.
And I mean, first and foremost, for those who are listening, who are familiar with you and your work, can we just ask, how are things? How is your world? What does it look like right now?
Whew. Thank you for asking, friend. We had a fire on December 5th, 2020, which both feels like yesterday and a long time ago. In the middle of the COVID craziness, where we all shut down our churches and stopped doing things in person. Then our church burned down in December. The day of the fire is like right here, just the flames lapping the building, 6-alarm fire, crazy fire that took days to stop with the embers and the little bitty burns. So that's a thing that I say sometimes, Brandan. I say the fire keeps burning. What are we going to do? What about the insurance? What about rebuilding? Can we afford that? Can we do that? We got a decent insurance policy, but the East Village is the East Village, if y'all know New York. So we are this close to knowing for sure. My board voted to rebuild, and we're in a 4-church collegium. So the whole collegium is assessing readiness, finances, et cetera, to see what we'll do. And we'll know by April 4th. People have been so kind to us, and prayers and donations, and 600 people joined the church since we shut down in March. How in the world does that happen without a building? So there's a lot of love out there, Brandan, and we're so grateful, friends, for that. Thank you.
On one hand, glad to hear things are going okay, and also, I mean, terribly sorry. I was just watching a YouTube interview that you did right before all of this happened, and it was an incredible space. But I mean, I think the thing that, not to even sound cliche, I think your community is proving this, that it has always been more than a historic building in this village, and what you all are up to is so much bigger than that. And I absolutely hope that a building works out for you all in the near future. That's
me too. Thank you, Brandan. Appreciate that.
Yeah. And so part of reading Fierce Love has been, for me, getting to know a little bit more about the journey that you've had to becoming this incredible faith leader that you are. And so for those who might not know, this is probably an unfair question to ask, but can you describe, like in a brief summary, your journey from being a businesswoman to now being a prominent faith leader who is calling on folks all around the world to adopt this posture and this belief in fierce love and its power to change the world?
Yeah, your question makes me want to cough a little bit more. My allergies flare up with the hard questions. 1 second. Wow. I have had an incredible journey from kindergarten as an oldest child in my family, with my mom and dad teaching me how to deal with being called the N-word for the first time, prayer and activism. From, you're too young for this, Brandan, but in the olden days, we took aptitude tests, right? The ACT and the, what's the other one? SAT. And those tests would say your aptitudes. So I had aptitudes in math and science. And so let's go be an engineer. Like from that time to no, I'm not going to be an engineer, to studying business, but to having the kind of backdrop of my soul, I would say, a sense of calling to ministry that I felt from the first communion I took, where my mom helped me fall in love with God through camp as a freshman in high school, literally laying on the sand at a camp and thinking, gosh, I am moving these clouds. You know how that feeling is, to feeling like God was moving me toward ministry.
Wow.
The assassination of Dr. King, that camp experience, these were all kinds of moments of feeling like God was speaking a vocation to me. And I didn't say yes to it right away because I didn't think girls could be pastors. But I feel like all the things that happened, the kind of corporate life and volunteering deeply in Big Brothers Big Sisters and starting choirs and managing territory, selling copiers is kind of like selling Jesus, but not really. All of that stuff led me to 30-year-old go to seminary at Princeton and feel like you're stepping into a Jacqui-shaped hole in the universe.
Yeah.
I did 8 years of urban ministry in Trenton, and then went to grad school again, got a PhD in psych and religion at Drew, and came to study Middle Church as my dissertation project on churches that are multiracial, multi-ethnic. And how do you lead that? How do you do that? I fell in love with those guys and they fell in love with me. So when I graduated, they gave me a job and the rest is history. I've been there 18 years, Brandon. Who stays at a church for 18 years? I did.
Yeah, on one hand, that totally sounds just hard to believe anyone could do. But I mean, looking at, again, just from the outside, seeing the kind of community that Middle has been and that you've gotten to cultivate as the senior minister there, it looks like such an incredible church. And yeah, I'm so grateful that you followed that sense of calling because your voice is so important. Yeah.
Me too. And they are, I'm called to them and we're called to the world. So I am literally that Ubuntu philosophy they talk about. I am who I am because they are who they are. And it is such a rich, joyous, intense, beautiful partnership between me and the lay people. It's great.
I love that. Incredible. And you kind of just started to touch on it, but this book is a book about love. And on one hand, love is such a powerful concept, but
yes,
often it's seen as one that's kind of overly played, maybe kind of just used in new age spirituality, but it doesn't really have any substance or meaning. At least I think there's a lot of cynicism around the word love in a lot of circles.
That's right.
And so I wonder if you could talk about what love is, what fierce love is, and why you felt the need to write a book about love. Like, what was the driving force in your experience with this reality of love that has led you to want to share a message with the world about it?
Yeah, thank you, Brandon. I started outgrowing my faith about maybe 20 years ago, probably in grad school, looking at psychology and religion and the role religion plays in identity development. And honestly, Brandon, the ways that we have used religion, we, the church, we, the mosques, the synagogues, have used religion to control people, to manage people, to stifle people. I was thinking, God, I want a more grown-up relationship with a grown-up God. That was my feeling in grad school. Like, can we just grow God up and really get it together? Yeah. But I realized also, actually, I don't care that much about the theistic models that get us having this conversation. I am a theist. I believe in God. I believe that Jesus came to earth to teach us about God. But over here are the humanists and the atheists and the agnostics and the Buddhists. And I was thinking about what's the vocabulary to have about a movement, Brandon, that would really be the best, sort of divine human partnership, or the best partnership between humans and the universe. Pick your language. And I thought, love is it. And love isn't a nammy-pammy, codependent, Hallmark holiday moment. Love is fierce. Love is demanding. Love love does insist on its own way because love insists on love. And I wanted to get in the love conversation. I'd been talking to Valerie Kaur about revolutionary love. You talked to Van Jones about the Love Army. You talked to Glennon Doyle about love warriors. All this conversation about love happening around the globe, really. What is it? How can we harness it as power? The beloved community, so much a part of King's teachings and Gandhi's teachings. And so this book is my sermon, my calling in, my manifesto for all generations to say, if you want to be a part of the healing of the world, then you have to traffic in love. You have to be schooled in love. You have to learn really how to love yourself.
Yeah.
And then really how to love your posse with an unconditional regard, with a non-possessive delight. And that will in turn help you to love the world. I think love is the only thing that is going to set us free from our crazy, violent context that's called culture.
Yeah. Yeah. And the cynic in me wants to ask, do you think love will win in the end? Do you think that in this moment of human history, as we look out, it feels like, my big world has been on TikTok for the past couple of years, and I've seen a lot of youth, even recently, making videos about despair at the state of the world. And we're talking about people who are 16. And so I look out at the world right now, and even as a person of faith, I wonder, are we going to make it through all of this? And I wonder what you think about that.
Yeah, I want to say I share your realism. These are the hot mess times. It is terribly difficult to be a human being today, with threats of war on the global stage, with anti-female, anti-queer, anti-Muslim, anti-Jewish, anti-Black, anti-Asian, anti-immigrant sentiment just running amok, with one political party just absolutely devolved to nationalist, authoritarian, bigoted mindlessness.
Yeah.
And the other one kind of, I don't know what the Democrats are doing, but they're not really being prophetic.
Yeah.
And that's just our context, right, Brandan? But we're global neighbors. And so everywhere you turn, Ukraine, Russia, everywhere you turn, Palestine, Israel. So the reality of the fraughtness is right here in my heart. And it's Black History Month, and I'm Black, as you know. And I think about James Weldon Johnson's beautiful poem that turned into the so-called Negro national anthem. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever on thy path, we pray. We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. So my people, like your people, like humankind, have traversed insanity, oppression, the shard glass of inequality, mountains of despair. And we're here, We're here surviving. We're here thriving. We're here making babies, raising babies, taking care of elders, doing science, doing math, doing art, doing culture, singing in the choir, feeding people when they're hungry, changing the political landscape of this nation. We know how to do fierce love. You know how to do fierce love. And so I have hope in the great cloud of witnesses that have gone before us that know what to do.
Yeah, no, totally. That's such a good word. And I think I think the overwhelming nature of it comes from when we look at the world, we think that we are somehow responsible for fixing all of the stuff that is happening right now. And I think
Right.
what I love about the trajectory of the book is that you start with, as you mentioned, self-love. You start with, if we're going to get anywhere, it's going to begin with looking at ourselves and learning how to love ourselves. And again, this can be another concept that cynical folks might listen to and look at and say,
What is self-love?
yeah, what in the world?
What is love?
I wonder, so what is self-love tangibly? I mean, there's feeling better about yourself or having a good self-image, but really describe how you get into it in the book.
Well, first of all, I'm arguing in the book that all the world's major religions are ensconced and shaped on this kind of love neighbor as self, right? It's not something Christians made up. In fact, Rabbi Jesus pulls it right out of Leviticus and Deuteronomy when he's asked, what's the greatest commandment? And he's like, love God with everything you have, love your neighbor as yourself. That's what it is, these two things. And you and I know, Brandan, that the Greek word for and is os, and it's an equal sign. So love your neighbor as yourself. That's the same. Love your neighbor in the same way you love yourself. I became convinced that really what's happening with the crazy violence in the world is we have people who don't love themselves, bipping and skipping around, making policy, making laws, running systems, running corporations, deciding on pay scales, hiring people, walking on the subway, right? Like hanging in the world, a whole virtual army of unself-lovers who were not taught really to love themselves, and therefore they love their neighbors poorly. We're not taught to love ourselves. We're taught that that's selfish or narcissistic or prideful. But to me, Brandan, if we believe in a God who created us in their image, if we believe that we are awesomely and wonderfully made in the image of the holy, it's almost sacrilegious to not love yourself, to not love the unformed substance that became you, to not love the ups, the downs, the foibles, the badassery, the good things, the bad things, every single thing that is you, your physiognomy, your skin tone, your body fat level, your intellect, your fears, all of these things about each of us is a soupçon of the holy. Psalm 185 says, Psalm 85, y'all, says we're created a little lower than God. And sometimes the church is so uncomfortable with that, they take Elohim, which is usually translated God, and say, "Oop, that must mean angels. We're created a little lower than angels." No. A little lower than God, a little like God. How can we not love the God in us? So my starting place is an act of faith, faithfulness, fidelity, an act of trust in the God who made us, is to love us, have an unconditional, non-possessive delight in us, me, because I represent God.
Yeah, I love that. And I think at the same time, one of the barriers to self-love is both in religious context and in our culture at large, we live in a moment of shame. And there are really important conversations in this moment about all sorts of aspects of identity for both marginalized communities and people of privilege. And
that's right.
Such important conversations. And yet so many of the conversations on all the sides revolve around a sense of shame. And I've just been noticing that more and more in conversations I've had, particularly around privilege with white folks. And like, how do I help folks reframe and understand systemic injustice and how people participate in it, while also teaching a message of self-love? And I wonder, do you have any wisdom into that particular conversation? Because I think that might be one of the biggest barriers to progress, is the amount of shame, and people call it cancel culture and all sorts of things. Like, there's a good side of all of this and something that's preventing people from understanding how to love their true selves, I think.
Yeah, I really love Brene Brown's work on shame and on courage. I really love Serene Jones' work on trauma. I really love Kelly Brown Douglas's work on all things like theology of cross. I think women, Cheryl Strayed, who's really dear sugar too. A lot of the women I'm reading, Candace, is she here? Red Lip Theology.
Yeah.
A lot of women I'm reading are, to me, helping to create a conversation about letting go of shame. And it's not simple, right, Brandan? It's not tell yourself to let go of shame. It's a whole environment in which we're taught to be ashamed, almost as though the shame takes the place of something. The shame takes the place of real repentance, you and I might say, of really turning around toward a better way to be. Like there's this whole kind of hole of I don't belong, I made a mistake, I'm a worm, that's built into Western Christianity. But that, to me, that's a placeholder for the real work, and the real work is to actually be damn sorry, like not ashamed, but sorry. The real work is to actually be repentant. I'm not going to do that again. The real work is to make reparations. I really screwed up your life, or I really hurt your feelings, or I really made a mistake and I have to own it. So instead of like the real work that constructs new relationship, shame sits there as a placeholder. Does that make sense? And it does its job, because you just bip and skip and running around feeling ashamed, as opposed to I really need to kind of have a conversation with Brandan and see if we can make amends.
Yeah.
So this is what I'd like to do, is to say to folks, when you get ready to say, I feel ashamed, like what could you stick there? Because language matters. I feel what? Sad, hurt. I feel like I let myself down. I feel embarrassed that I, hurt you. I feel like I long for it to be, all right again. Like, let's get some better language.
Yeah.
So that we get to the real work.
Yeah.
As opposed to letting shame, like shame does a job on you and me. I feel ashamed. Okay. Then what?
Totally.
Does that make sense to you?
I think that's really well described. I feel like that's precisely part of the problem of the moment that we're living in, is that there's so much shame going around that people are allowing to weigh them down, and also use it as an excuse to not do the work to repent, change. I think that's so succinctly.
Wasted calories. Like, I love potato chips, but that's not going to really nurture me.
No, totally.
But, right. So like, if shame is like the potato chips to what? To transformation,
right?
Which is maybe spinach. I don't know.
Not spinach.
Okay, a steak. Yeah.
So we have self-love. We have this broader concept of love. But what does love mobilized look like? Like, how can we actually, when we look at it our politically and socially and every other way, divided nation, what does it look like for people who hear you, who read this book, who get caught up in this vision of fierce love? How do we then come together and mobilize and actually make a change in our world? And do you have any examples of that happening in your own experience?
Sure. I mean, I think, I divide this book into 3 sections. The first one's you, the second one is you and your posse, your people, and the third is you and the world. And it's not like linear, we're going to go around and around in these things. But the activism, if you will, that the book is prescribing is about, I'm going to do the self first, like self-reflection. I talk about picking up your story and looking at it. Like, don't be in denial and don't do shame on it. Like, oh my goodness, right here, this really sucked. This was horrible. or I really have a gift for getting people to come along a journey with me, like truly look at yourself, tell the truth to yourself about yourself. And that includes, I'm going to love myself. I'm going to let go of the baggage. I'm going to really try to downsize the junk I'm carrying around in the world. That's activism, Brandan. I was talking to someone yesterday who was in so much pain. And I was like, you need a therapist. So like, get a therapist, get a coach, talk to your pastor, have an accountability buddy, exercise, go for walks with people. Make you a project of your activism.
Yeah.
Because love has to be, love is an action, right? It's a verb, not just a word. So that's one. And the second thing I think is that to turn the activism, the action, if you will, inside your most intimate relationships. Your closest neighbor and love neighbor as self is your husband, your partner, your wife, your spouse, your kids, the baby daddy mama that live upstairs, your Uncle Bob, who's always saying racist things at the dinner table, right? Your neighbors, these close people who you love. If you can love yourself unconditionally, accept all of you, the strangest part of you, you can love the strangest part of your family member. I had a talk with my sister today. I'm sorry, Wanda, but I had a really good talk with her today, a hard, good talk. And, the same kind of conversation 20 years ago, Brandan, would have hooked me in a different way. But like, I love her. She got stuff to work on, so do I. Yeah. But I love her. And so the compassion I have for myself, I can have for her, I can have for my dad, the story about bumpy stories in the book about dad, I can have for my employee, right? And then I think finally, if we get back to Ubuntu, this philosophy of I am who I am because you are who you are, when we start saying we love our neighbor, we actually are loving ourselves, right? Because your neighbor is you. Your neighbor's self-interest is your self-interest. So you want to make their clean water in Detroit so the kids aren't thirsty. And you want to make sure that there are better social safety nets for seniors and for college graduating kids. And you want there to be a living wage. And you want there to be healthcare and time off, because that mother struggling is your mother struggling. You want there to be anti-hate crime legislation so that Asian people don't get their butts kicked and there not be any restitution or justice. You want Black lives to matter because then yours matters. This is the kind of beautiful interconnected web of humanity that Dr. King describes, and that is the beloved community, Brandan, in which you and I are inextricably connected. And what happens to you, can you marry? Can you love your partner? Can you be safe? Is what happens to me. That is the whole gamut of what fierce love is about, is to literally love you and your neighbor in the same way.
Yeah, totally. And so these cynical questions were not how I was planning to go, but I'm sitting here, I'm mindful. I live just a few blocks from the White House. I'm kind of in the midst of.
You're in the midst of it, aren't you?
Yeah. And I wonder, like, anybody who's listening to this, who hears you describe this, I believe is on board. I feel like at the deepest longing of human souls will align with this vision of love, self, love neighbor. It's an ancient message. Why?
Yes, it is.
What is the barrier? When we talk about like the powers and the principalities and the political structures, why haven't we done this? Why is it so hard to actually legislate from a place of love? Why is it so hard to organize enough people to transform systems into the way of love? Like, I wonder what your insight there might be.
That's hard. That's hard. I really think, Brandan, when we're afraid, when resources feel scarce, when we think we are losing. We become really selfish. And it's probably just kind of animal kingdom leftover stuff, right? Like, what? I'm going to hunker down. I'm going to circle my wagons. I'm going to take my little monkey baby and stick it under here and bat you in the head. Do you watch all those crazy TikTok / Instagram videos of monkeys lately?
Yes.
I'm fascinated that people are so fascinated with the monkeys.
Yeah.
But if you watch, there's a lot of cuddling and there's a lot of love and there's like, what? You are trying to take my baby's banana swat. There's a lot of tribalism or clanism, family. This is what we need to do. And that's what's happened, Brandan, I think, is that we have turned really inward to our people, our 5, 6, 20 people.
Yeah.
And I think the revolution that we need is these people think of these people as their people. That we are all each other's people. And that actually is ambitious and myopic.
Yeah.
It totally is. And we got to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah. To continue just coercing you to talk down this same line of reasoning, because I think it's so helpful right now. You have this phrase, you say, in a divided America, no one is saved unless everyone is saved. And
absolutely,
I think, but what about the people that are perpetuating the prophecy? When people hear like, because I mean, I struggle with this because I'm with you, I preach this message. And when I get pushback from communities that are suffering and saying, yeah, and look at Donald Trump and look at those people, what does kindness look like in the face of that?
What rule-breaking kindness?
Yeah.
It looks crazy. Crazy. Ba, ba, da, ba, da, da. Crazy love, right? Crazy love, crazy rule-breaking love. The kind of thing that would happen if you were just standing outside and you looked up at the sky and the meteor was falling down.
Yeah.
Or you were standing on the edge of the resort or the beach and you looked and saw the wave coming. And the tsunami is going to come, and you're hearing the broadcast, gonna hit at 2:00. You are not going to figure out who you're going to save. You're not. The instinct is going to kick in to say, come on, let's go, let's run, come on. You're going to grab somebody. If a Republican is standing on the corner about to step in traffic because they're looking at their stupid ass phone, you are not going to say, excuse me, which party are you in? Before you grab their elbow and pull them back. There is a kind of instinct, a kind of response to shared trauma, catastrophe that makes us go, y'all all come in this room as long as there's room. And I think it's that kind of crazy, self-sacrificial, I don't see anything except another human beingness that I'm trying to advocate that we get to. And it's not like magic and easy tomorrow, but we've all done it. Like we did it, right? The hurricane came and you helped. The levees broke and you helped. The hunger came and you helped. There was a famine and we helped. We know how to do it. We just, I think, have to regress and remember that we know how to treat each other's wounds.
Yeah.
We do.
Yeah.
And by the way, anybody listening, craziness, the erosion of voting rights, craziness that we're going to kill Roe v. Wade, craziness that we're burning books, craziness. I don't have any oh my goodness feelings for book burners. Yeah. I don't. So this is hard. And my question becomes, what do I want to say to the people who are so afraid they're going to burn the books? I want to say, what are you afraid of? I want to be in a conversation that's like, don't we want our children to know what happened in the past so we don't repeat it? There's lots of strategies to get to transformation. The one I choose the one I want us to choose also is one that acknowledges I make mistakes, and so do you. And what do we really want together in the world? And can we find a way to it?
Yeah.
And I'm not going to pretend, and black out. I think that's crazy what y'all are doing, because I think it's crazy what you're doing. But to get to better, I think we have to walk through the inconvenience of listening to your enemy.
Yeah. I think that's spot on. We know that's spot on. Again, this wisdom is ancient, and yet in this moment of digital technology where it's easier to see people as ideologies and the ideologies they believe in rather than as complex arrays of experiences that lead people to believe a certain thing. Demonize from distance way too often. And
we do, Brandan. That's right.
I am hopeful that we can, as the pandemic wears down, like when we get around dinner tables again over Thanksgiving, hopefully this year, and like people start connecting again, that there is a new awareness that it's not just demonize your political other, not just demonize Uncle Bob because he's a racist, whatever, but rather like do the work. And it's hard work, and it's frustrating work.
It's such hard work.
Yeah.
And is it worth it, right? Is it worth it? I mean, I tell the stories in the book about my dad's, temper, and, I'm not going to like you today because you're not behaving the way I want you to behave, and I'm going to punish you with my words and all the things. And my dad and I are in great shape together. We are having a wonderful relationship because of truth telling and carefrontation or confrontation, or like the what do you really want? Like, what do you really want? I don't really want to not have a dad, but I also really want to have myself intact. So that requires radical truth telling, Brandan, right? It requires risk taking. It requires, vulnerability to really show your soul to somebody. It requires asking a good question. It requires having a regard for them, even when you disagree with them. And by regard, I mean that too is a child of God. Like, that is a child of God. They might not be behaving it, but they are. And can we just try to, like, we might as well try something new.
Yeah.
The old thing's not working. So, yeah.
Totally. I love it. And kind of not to completely shift gears, but to kind of go down a slightly different path. I think a lot of this community here, Metanoia community, is, as I'm sure Middle is as well, a lot of folks who are coming from religious backgrounds that were toxic and traumatic, and a lot of people that are one step away from giving up on religion, whatever it might be. One thing that I've always found so compelling about you is that you really lean into the Bible and your tradition, and you're not afraid to both critique and grapple with it and use it in creative, fresh ways.
Yes.
And so I think the one question I want to ask is, why do you still resonate with this tradition? Why do you still feel the need to lead a church? Like, for the people that are cynical about these things, who have been hurt by these things, what is your message of why these things can still be useful and how they might be redeemed?
I just love that question so much. There's a song when I was a kid, a gospel song. When you're down and out and I can't find my way, there's a voice I hear, a voice, something, something, something. And it was just, it's just Jesus. It's just Jesus. It's just Jesus. Really. Christianity sucks sometimes. That's the truth. It just does. Who made that up? Who said that? Who decided that? Jesus said, love God with everything you have, love your neighbor as yourself. Love God, love neighbor, love self. Love, period, I like to say. Everything else is commentary. So I'm not so I love my friends Shane and the Red Letter Christians, and I think I could argue all those red letters might not have been what Jesus said too, but that's okay. But the idea of kind of looking for the voice of God through Jesus, that just works for me. So if I can keep my eyes on the place where I believe, because it's a miracle, Brandan, that the scriptures that the synoptic gospels and John all are trying to say the same thing. That's a miracle. It's a miracle that the pastoral letters are mostly pointing to the same kind of thing. There's such a thread of consistency about what justice looks like, what love looks like, right? What compassion, forgiveness, kindness look like, what it means to share your resources in the world. Like, you could do a word cloud and there would be some really significant themes that emerge that guide my life. I don't give up on it, because I think the teachings of Rabbi Jesus, whether he's your Lord and Savior or your best friend or your teacher or a prophet, pick one, the teachings of Jesus are instructive for human living.
Yeah.
So I'm in for it. I'm in for Jesus's teachings, and I'm in for teaching Jesus's teachings, and I'm in for a hermeneutic of suspicion about lots of stuff in there that's designed to hurt people like you and me. The Constitution didn't have me in mind, and neither did the Bible, okay? But there's good stuff in there for living an ethical, morally courageous, radically kind life.
Yeah. It strikes me as quite similar to the national project that we're facing right now and the biblical Christianity project of we have these two things that are, on some sense, really profound and helpful, and also filled with a lot of terrible, destructive things. And
that's right.
We're in a moment where there are a lot of people that want to give up on democracy, American experiment, whatever you might want to call it. And there are a lot of people who want to give up on Christianity. And I understand that. And I encourage folks to go where they need to go to be whole and safe and flourish. And I think I feel quite similarly. I don't believe anything I used to believe about Christianity or the Bible. And yet, the more I dive into this tradition, the more I dive into the person of Jesus, there is more wisdom there that challenges me and challenges this time we're living in.
Right.
And there are ways, one of the things that it was both, I saw you preach about it, and my professor from ILIF, Miguel de la Torre, talked about it. And I recently, a year ago, did a TikTok about the story of Jesus and the Samaritan woman, and Jesus seeing Jesus as potentially saying something, ethnic slur or religious or whatever. And people flipped out, obviously, suggesting that. But I think there's something so profound about being able to go back to the tradition, go back to the person of Jesus, going back to our theology and saying, can we, as you said, a hermeneutic of suspicion, can we look at this another way? Seeing Jesus in a light where he might have made a mistake and might have done something wrong, might have inherited a belief system and structure that was wrong, and correcting it, I find that to be such a compelling way of understanding Jesus, and makes me want to follow Jesus all the more, because he's willing to change.
To be changed, to have a close encounter with an other and be changed. If that's not fierce love, I don't know what is. And if it is, and Brandan, the disciples, the writers of the Gospels, whoever those first storytellers were, did not have to leave that in there. They didn't have to tell that.
Yep.
That's not good marketing for Jesus, actually. But wow, that they did. That I am a man, I'm a product of my culture, I'm a product of my time. I call this Canaanite woman a dog. And then I change my mind because I'm wrong.
Yeah.
That's kind of good.
Yeah, so good. I wonder, is there a moment on your own theological journey where you were able to make these shifts, speaking to an audience of people that some of them are really afraid to begin thinking in this way? And I can imagine lots of people hearing this being like, I don't know what to do with this.
Yeah. I mean, many points on the journey, but I think two I'll tell. One is just really being a young woman at that camp where I felt called to ministry, and one of my chaperones, me and her daughter scurried back to be on time for curfew and got in there. We were so proud of ourselves, and she really scolded us for leaving our other cabin mates behind. That was the beginning of something for me, Brandan. That is faith about making a small club, or is it about taking everybody with us? And I'm really clear that the gospel message is about widening the tent. I mean, yeah, came to the Jews first. Like let's read all that stuff with the right lens. But it seems to me that the idea is widening a tent so that God gets to relate to God's people, period. So that's a really important little piece. I think the first time Mark Lewis Taylor was one of my professors and also started coming to my church in Trenton. And I remember one Easter, I preached what I had heard said so many times. It was like, Jesus had to die so we could live. Jesus had to die so we could live. Unexamined, that's how it goes. And he died and he went, but death didn't have the last word. And he rose up, you know what I mean? The whole thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah. And Mark just said, let's have a question for you. Did he have to die? It was just a question. Did he have to die? I was like, oh, what? And he didn't say like atonement theory. And did he have to die? Wow. That question sent me on a quest. And I don't believe Jesus had to die. He did die.
Yeah.
God's infinite wisdom made it so that he had to die. What kind of God is that, right? So the thing is that the first question causes 20 more. And that's why we don't encourage questions. But I want to just say to those who are listening what Fred Buechner says, that doubt is the ants in the pants of faith. I think doubt provokes a stronger faith in God. A little heresy is a good thing.
Totally. I absolutely agree. Yeah. And I've got a question that came in from Cheryl, who's someone from our community, and you've kind of already touched on this in the broader conversation, but I think it's worth asking. From your pastoral position, as you're looking out at a congregation of people who, again, are in the midst of this mess and are struggling and hear messages like this and maybe are trying to make self-love a real thing and then turn that into fierce love in the world. What's that general word of encouragement to people who are struggling? Cheryl says, what do you say to people who are struggling to keep pressing on?
Yeah. Yeah, Cheryl. These are difficult times. Where pressing on is a big project. And maybe the message of Hebrews about that great cloud of witness who have gone before us, and it's not just there, but it's, your Irish ancestors or your, Scandinavian ancestors or your indigenous ancestors or my Black ancestors who we prove that they pressed on because we're sitting here, talking to each other. The humankind presses on, and that we find a new way to be a people with technology, with art and creativity, with nurturing each other with good food, with discovering medicines, and with discovering all the time new ways to think about the holy other that is both outside of us and inside of us, that we are becoming all the time. And when I feel like not pressing on, just look around me and I see people, my friend Gloria, who is crestfallen at the deaths of Asian women, who gets up and goes to work, as a first responder every day. And those people too. So that's what it is. It's us seeing each other as resilient. And then we're inspired to be resilient ourselves.
Amazing. Thank you for that. And really, again, I'm so grateful for your work in Witness in the World and for this book. It's been out for a few months, 2 months now. Yeah. So the final big question is, what's next? Where can people find more? Is there anything coming up that you want to let people know about?
Well, we are doing fierce love sightings all over the place still. The book dropped in November, but it's having a big love. You talk about love in February. You talk about Black folk stuff in February. And so tomorrow night at Middle Church is our Freedom Rising Salon, and it is at 7 o'clock. You can register at middlechurch.org. Lisa Sharon Harper, who has a new book out called Fortune, How Race Broke My Family and What We Need to Fix It. And also Black Lives Matter, not Black Voters Matter, is going to be with us tomorrow night. And so Latasha Brown and Lisa and I are going to have this Black woman, conversation about love and voting rights and justice. And I hope you'll come. It'd be so great. And if you're at middlechurch.org, you can see all kinds of things that we're doing in these next weeks on the way to Lent. Oh my God, Brandon, we're on the way to Lent to think about how we're going to be new. How are we going to be tabernacling in the wilderness that is American life? So just come to the church, and in your pajamas, you can come to church at middlechurch.org at 11:45 Eastern time. It's awesome sauce. Follow me at Rev Jacqui Lewis in all the places, and I'll try to say something inspirational about fierce love.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much. Thanks for your work in the world and for being with us tonight.
It's so